To tee up a blog that I wrote today, I asked people on Twitter whether either you or Boris Johnson could both unite the Tory party and unite the country. And there was an overwhelming response from people saying, no, this is an impossible task. So what do you say to those people?
Well, we have to do both because we're not going to get a Brexit deal unless we can unite the Conservative Party and get a deal through the House of Commons. And we may well not get no deal either if we can't get some kind of consensus in the Conservative Party over the way forward. And I think that I have the skills to unite both sides of the party in that respect. But I think the really important issue for a Prime Minister is how are you going to bring the country back together? Because we've had this very divisive debate, and my answer to that is the way you unite the country is not by trying to stop Brexit. You have to deliver the Brexit that the 52% voted for, but you need to have a Brexit that addresses the concerns of the 48% who voted Remain, who don't want us to become an insular country where we pull up the drawbridge and say foreigners not welcome. And none of the Brexiteers I know want that or voted for that. But I think in 10 years' time, if we've still remained an outward-looking, internationally minded, tolerant country, then that will put to rest many of the concerns of the people who voted to remain.
Now, many would say we are facing a national emergency. You've just been addressing a small number of people who have a vote on who will be the next Tory leader, the next Prime Minister. Most of that room were middle-aged, men, white. The electorate in this contest is less than 0.5% of the UK population. Lots of British people think that's just not fair.
Well, I understand those concerns, but we're a party, we have our rules, and we have to follow those rules. But the point I make to Conservative Party members is that we have to choose someone who is going to win in the country. And the biggest change in this campaign, for many people the biggest surprise, is that I've moved from being the rank outsider, the no-hoper, to someone who the majority of ordinary voters, not Conservative Party member voters, but of all voters, want to be the next Prime Minister. An 11% lead in the YouGov poll, and actually in cities like London, where there are lots of young people, a 30% lead in terms of who people want to be the next Prime Minister. So we have to be very careful that we choose the kind of person who will represent the whole country and can command a majority of the whole country.
Now, some in the Boris camp have conceded to me that they think there is a bit of momentum behind your campaign. But something I pointed out this morning is that, let's just say you did come through and you won the vote of Tory members, you would be in this rather extraordinary position that you would then be in charge of a bunch of Tory MPs, more than half of whom voted for somebody else. Now, the last time that happened, when Ian Duncan Smith was chosen by Tory members against the wishes of Tory MPs, he was a lame duck leader.
Well, I think those were very different situations, and I think the reason that Boris got the support he did, frankly, is because there was a kind of front-runner effect, and when you think that someone is a slam dunk to win, then MPs rally to that flag. But you know, if you look at the kind of person I am and the kind of people who supported me, I have the ability to unite the Conservative Parliamentary Party. I'm someone who...
But why are you better placed to unite the Remainer wing of your party with the sort of ERG Brexiter wing of your party than a Prime Minister, Theresa May, who spent all her time trying to do that and failed?
Because I do things differently. And look, I have the greatest of respect for Theresa May. She has an amazing sense of duty. And, you know, I think the country recognises the hard yards that she put in. But she was trying to get a deal through Parliament that I didn't want us to do, and I argued against it in the Cabinet. And I would be trying to get a different deal through Parliament, one that deals with the backstop issues in a different way. And I wouldn't be putting a proposal to the European Union until I knew it had the support of the UK Parliament. So I'm going to approach this in a different way, but it will be a way that fundamentally addresses the concerns of Remain voting Conservative MPs, that we need a deal that is good for business and good for the Union, but also, as I have done consistently, supports what the Brexiteers in my party want, which is a clean Brexit that leaves the single market and the customs union.
Now, you yesterday outlined your 10-point plan to deliver Brexit. And part of it is that you'll set up a special committee with the sort of powers that COBRA, which deals with national emergencies, have, and you'll cancel the leave of civil servants if their departments aren't ready for a no-deal Brexit, and then you'll negotiate all through the summer, and then you'll put a motion to Parliament, and you'll also have an emergency budget so that if we do have a no-deal Brexit, you'll try and offset the shock of a no-deal Brexit.
You've got a very good memory, Robert. Well done.
Well, it's striking stuff. But the point that you're really making is that a no-deal Brexit would be a national emergency, which leaves me wondering, why on earth are you contemplating actually precipitating a national emergency?
Well, I am someone who thinks that there would be a serious impact of no deal, and that's why I wanted the country to know that I have the plans in place to mitigate that effect. For example, for the business I met in Kidderminster during the campaign, it's a steel factory, they make steel wheels, they have more than half the European market, and they would be very adversely affected by the introduction of tariffs. So
I think you said there was a risk they'd go bust.
Yes, absolutely, and so that's why I want businesses like that to know that I put support in place. But, you know, I've been saying in this campaign that what we need is a negotiator. I've talked about being an entrepreneur by background. I've been teased for talking about that a number of times. But what I wanted to show is the way you negotiate a better deal is by showing the other side that you are making proper, detailed plans in case you can't get a deal. And so,
but what is your best estimate? Do you think, for example, that the economic shock could be as bad as the banking crisis?
Well, the Bank of England's predictions are that it wouldn't be quite that bad, but it could be very serious if we get this wrong. But I've always said that in the end, you've got to make a choice. And my judgment is that when I go around the world as Foreign Secretary, people say that one of the most amazing things about your country is that you are one of the most robust democracies in the world, one of the oldest democracies. And this is a country where we do what the people tell us. So we have to deliver Brexit. We have to make it a success. And part of the way we'll make it a success is two things. First of all, preparing for a no-deal Brexit. But in the process of preparing for it, we actually make it less likely. Because the people we're negotiating with see, OK, these guys are ready. They're serious. They are prepared to walk away without a deal. And then I think that will make them more willing to negotiate the kind of deal that will be better for them and better for us.
Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. But one of the cliches about that referendum is that nobody voted to make themselves significantly poorer. And yet you're sort of arguing that is what people voted for.
People voted to take a risk on our future because they thought that it would be a good risk to take, and they looked at our history and they said, you know, we have weathered much bigger storms than this in the past and we can make it a success. And of course people were hoping for a deal, but they were given lots of warnings about the economic consequences of leaving the European Union, and they decided, no, we can make this work. And actually, in many ways, they were proved right, because the impact on the economy after the referendum result wasn't anything like as bad as some people predicted. So we have our marching orders, we have what the British people have told us to do. I believe we can make a success. I think we can make a success of no deal, but we'll do that by having...
Well, not in the short term. Almost nobody believes that there won't be a shock in the short term.
Exactly, and that is why I say you have to have detailed plans to support small businesses, businesses like the business that I set up, which are very, very vulnerable to these kinds of shocks. And I want people to know that I am going to be there for them as Prime Minister, so that if this happens, and I hope it doesn't happen, but if this happens, we have the plans in place, and that was what my 10-point plan was.
Now, I'm going to move on in a second, but just two other points on this. The Chancellor has confirmed today that the Treasury believes that a no-deal Brexit would add £90 billion to the national debt. That's a price worth paying, is it?
Well, we will have short-term costs from a no-deal Brexit. That's why we want to avoid it. But we can get through this. And what I would say to any doubters is just look at our history. With resolve and determination, we're a country that's been up for these kind of challenges. That doesn't mean it's what we want. And I still believe there's a deal to be done. And the choice we have really is not about our attitudes to a no-deal Brexit, because both Boris and I are basically saying the same thing. We don't want no deal, but if it's the only way we can leave the European Union, then that is what we're prepared to do. The choice we have is who is the Prime Minister we trust to go to Brussels, who's got the best chance of creating some better choices for us, of negotiating a deal that can actually avoid this short-term impact, and that's where I think I would be the better choice.
So I'm going to come on to the negotiation in just one second. There's one final point, though, on this no-deal scenario. You were very pleased today to get the endorsement of William Hague. But William Hague, in his endorsement, also says that it's not just the economic shock of a no-deal we have to worry about, and here we are in Northern Ireland. He says it's the risk of the breakup of the United Kingdom, that we could see a situation in a no-deal where there is pressure for a referendum in Northern Ireland, which could see Northern Ireland unifying with the Republic, and indeed that would almost certainly lead in very short order to the Scots demanding a referendum and independence. These are very serious risks, aren't they?
They are. And William Hague is one of the most experienced statesmen we have in our country, and I think all of us in the Conservative Party listen to him very carefully, and that is precisely why a no-deal Brexit should be a last option and not a first choice, and why we need to choose someone, as he said, that has given himself the room to try to negotiate a deal. I don't say it's going to be easy, but nor is it impossible. And that would be by far the best outcome if we can negotiate that deal for businesses, for families, for people who worry they might lose their job, for people who aren't going to get the investment they were hoping for all sorts of people. It would be a better outcome. And I believe I'm the person who's got the very best chance of getting that outcome for our country.
Now, just to talk about the sequencing of how to avoid a no-deal Brexit. So you would become Prime Minister if you get your way. Towards the end of July, you would immediately try and start negotiations with the EU. Now, you say that the most important thing that you've got to achieve is a modification, a change to the backstop. Is the minimum that you want a time limit on the backstop?
Well, the minimum that I want is something that protects the soft border arrangements that we have on the island of Ireland, which are so important for the peace process, but doesn't tie us into being in what's called the EU's customs union, following EU tariffs, until such time as the EU decide we're free not to. That's the fundamental issue with the backstop.
So we've got to have the right to leave the backstop at a time of our choosing. And so that either means there's got to be an end date for it, or we've got to have a mechanism to get ourselves out. Is that what you're looking for?
We have to have the right as a sovereign parliament to decide whether or not we wish to be in the EU's customs union arrangements. The backstop does not allow us to do that, and that is what has to change.
And so that will be the crux of your negotiations over the summer.
Correct.
You've said that you will put a vote to Parliament. Would you be prepared to put that vote to Parliament before you are clear whether or not you are going to get a deal from the EU?
Well, I think we need to have some kind of way of showing the EU that anything we propose we can deliver through Parliament. Now, the main way that I'm going to do that is to have a much broader based negotiating team that will have in it the DUP, the ERG, who are the Brexit purists in the Conservative Party, Scottish and Welsh Conservatives, so we address those issues concerning the Union, as you've just talked about. And I think by putting those people in the negotiating team...
And when you say the negotiating team, do you sort of mean a negotiating team with you, or are you actually expecting these people to be negotiating with the EU?
Well, I'm expecting my Brexit secretary to lead a team of people that will include representatives.
So they'll feed into him?
They will feed into him. So the point is...
Might be a her.
It could indeed. We need to give the EU confidence that we can deliver what we promise. And that has to be the starting point. And then I will give them and by the way, I'm not going to show this to them blind. We'll be talking to them right from the moment I become Prime Minister with the kind of ideas that we're thinking of, the sort of technology arrangements that we've been seeing a bit more of this week. Then we will have some serious negotiations in September. And I think we will know, the whole country will know by the end of September if there is actually a prospect of a deal to be done.
Well, when is your parliamentary vote going to be?
Well, I think we will make those decisions nearer the time, but...
It's obviously got to be before the end of September, because you've said at the end of September you'll know whether there's deal or no deal.
Well, we will have to have a vote before October the 31st if there is a deal to be done, but I think prior to...
but I mean, what you want, you said, I thought, was a vote in Parliament to show the EU ahead of any agreement with the EU what there is a majority for.
Well, what I've said is there needs to be a way that the EU know that what we are promising we can deliver. Now, a vote in Parliament is one way.
You're not fixated on a vote in Parliament.
I am expecting there to be some kind of a vote in Parliament. I think it could be a very powerful way to show them. But it's also the negotiating team, the credibility of what you say. And this is really something that's a very short period of time. We get to the end of September, then I, as Prime Minister, will decide what I think we will all know by then for sure, whether there's a deal to be done. And if there isn't, talks will stop, we'll batten down the hatches and focus on no-deal preparations.
Now, we haven't got an unlimited amount of time, more's the pity. Two or three other things. One is the Chancellor has issued a warning to both you and Boris Johnson that he thinks you are spending money that he doesn't have, that the country doesn't have, and that you are risking blowing what he would see as your main competitive advantage over Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, which is you're careful with the people's money.
Well, I'm not going to do that, because the fiscal rule that I will follow will mean that we will continue to reduce debt as a proportion of GDP over the cycle. And for me, this is a moral issue as well as an economic issue, that we should not be racking up debt for future generations. I think it's an issue of trust between the generations, but also on a personal level. I am the Cabinet Minister who has had to implement the most painful cuts because we lost control of our national finances prior to my government getting into control and getting into power. So we are not going to give up those hard-won gains.
So just to be clear, the promises you've made of lots more money for the MOD, big cuts in corporation tax, they're meaningless because you haven't got the money.
The promises I made for the MOD and for the education budget, they would have to wait if we had a no-deal Brexit. The cuts in corporation tax, I think, are things that would help businesses be more resilient in the face of a no-deal Brexit. And I do think that one of the best things we can do is show the world on the point of Brexit that the British economy is powering ahead. If you look at the effect of Trump's business tax cuts in America, it's boosted American growth to more than double our levels. So I think these things would help. So that part of my package would be some business tax cuts, yes, but also specific support for sectors like farming and fishing that are affected by the tariff changes that we would have to deal with.
Now, you were very cross on Twitter this morning with the BBC. You're sort of implying that the BBC's been bullied by Boris Johnson into delaying a debate.
Well, I just think, what we need is to have a proper debate, a head-to-head debate between the two people who want to be our Prime Minister about all these big choices that you and I have been talking about. And that's what Conservative Party members want to see. It's what the country want to see. And Boris's campaign team are refusing to have any of those debates or really tough media interviews until after most Conservative Party members have actually voted. And I think that just makes a mockery of the whole thing. So I think the BBC should have had a bit more mojo and said, we're going to have this debate. If Boris doesn't turn up, we'll have an empty chair so the world can know that he hasn't turned up. But what they're trying to do is get us to do a debate long after the contest is all over. And I think the BBC can do better.
Couple of final things. The one word I have not used about you today, although it is an insult that's often flung at people like you is that you're a Remainer. How can you persuade actually a significant number of Tory members who simply don't believe in the end that your heart as somebody who voted to remain will be enough in getting us out of the EU?
I am like millions of Remainers up and down the country who voted Remain but now want to get on with Brexit and believe we can make a terrific success of Brexit. And I think what the Conservative Party members want, and I'm talking to people every day who maybe start off with that view and then they listen to me speak and they say, what we want now is not someone who can make great speeches, but someone who can actually lead this country as Prime Minister out of the biggest constitutional crisis in living memory. And I'm that person.
Two very short ones, if you don't mind. Literally just two very short ones. Did you see the pictures of the Brexit Party turning their backs when, the European anthem was played? What did you think about that?
I didn't see the pictures, but I heard about it. And I don't think anyone should show disrespect to someone else's flag. But I'm afraid it just shows how incredibly polarised politics has got. And in the case of Brexit, until we deliver Brexit, we're going to see this retreating to extremes, which is very bad for our country. So that's why we got to get on and deliver Brexit, but make it a successful Brexit.
Now, one of the bad things about going for the highest office is people feel they need to know you.
I sense a challenging question coming on here,
I
Robert.
know it's that challenging, but Boris Johnson made the claim that some people thought was bizarre, that in his spare times he sort of takes wine crates and turns them into model double-decker buses. Now, you pay your money to sort of takes your choice whether you think he devotes an enormous amount of time to making double-decker buses out of wine crates. But what do you do to relax?
Well, right now I've got 3 kids of 4, 7 and 9, so I don't have too much time for any hobbies of my own. But if you want a little nugget...
But everybody needs a hinterland.
A little hinterland. Let me tell you my hinterland. When I became an MP, before I had my family, my passion was a Brazilian dance called the lambada. And I used to go out dancing lambada at least once a week in the clubs of London. Sometimes I'd vote at 10 o'clock in the evening and then I'd be out. The thing about lambada, Robert, is it is really a singles dance. It's quite an intimate dance. And so once you get married and settle down, probably need to find something else, maybe tango.
But, well, there we go. That's an interesting suggestion for yourself. But, I mean, we saw the current Prime Minister doing a bit of ABBA.
Yes.
Are we going to see you lambada tango onto the
I
stage?
give you an absolute promise, as only politicians can, that I will never inflict that on our great nation.
Jeremy Hunt, good to talk to you.